The cost of IT in business can be staggering. From hardware and software expenses to services like internet and phone, you don't need to spend a fortune on IT to succeed. If your organization spends more than $500 monthly on any service, or you're considering signing a long-term contract, IT Enabled can help you manage your technology and minimize your costs. Contact us today to schedule a free consultation. IT Enabled, we're here to help.
Hi, I'm Tara Watson-Watkins, President and CEO of the Lufkin, Angelina County Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to the Connect podcast. I'm here today with my co-host, Blake Pollino with BP Media Group.
Welcome back to the show. We are super excited to have Erin Gallagher of Azleway Children's Services, an incredible podcast. This just really pulls at our heartstrings and is an amazing organization. So let's get into that now.
To have you on our podcast. Welcome.
Thank you for having me today.
Absolutely. So recently, Azleway Children's Services joined the chamber and we had your ribbon cutting. And I was just so moved by hearing everything that you do. So I cannot wait for our listeners to really understand this phenomenal service that we now have in Lufkin, Nacogdoches, and East Texas. So before we get into all of that, why don't you give the listeners a little bit about your background, how you got to Azleway, and then we'll talk about the services you provide.
Sure. I actually, probably about 16 or 17 years ago, I was interested in doing foster care myself, becoming a foster parent. And I kind of let the idea go. And then a family member of mine went into foster care. And I realized then, had I been a foster parent, it would have been easier to get custody of her. So that kind of started my process. And then after I was approved to get her, I started taking on other children. So we have fostered for about 16 years, over 20 children, 4 of which I've adopted. So now my home is pretty full. But so through that, we had to move from Virginia to Texas. Okay. And once my home was full, I decided, well, I can't foster anymore, but I can definitely do something else in the field. So I went back to school in my 40s and with 5 kids at home and became a social worker. So I just graduated from SFA in December.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And right after that, I saw a posting for Azleway, and I didn't think that I was going to go into the foster care field, but it is what I know. And so it was a perfect fit for me. And I love seeing families come together. I love seeing families reunited after a hardship. Mm-hmm. And it's just my passion work. Someone asked me the other day where I work, and I stumbled for a second because I thought I'm still in school. I don't work. Mm-hmm. And I realized, yes, I do have a job, but it's such a passion. It doesn't feel like work to me.
That's nice.
Mm-hmm.
That's incredible. So kind of give us the high-level overview of what Azleway Children's Services does and kind of the day-to-day on that.
So Azleway actually is multi-category. We have a boys ranch in Tyler, and so there is several cabins there. There's staff that stay there on site. We have a grocery store there where our children go in and shop for their needs. That is in Tyler for boys from 14 to 17. And then we have an ASAP program in Big Sandy, and that is for children who have drug and alcohol addiction. And I always say it's hard to believe that our children have drug and alcohol addictions at 14 years old, but it's just part of our reality. And so luckily we have a program that they can go through. They live on property. It's very rigid. And they come out and they're able to function back into society at that point. And then we have our foster and adoption program, which is where I fit in. And we find homes in the area that are good, loving homes, and we work to train them and certify them as foster parents. And then we place our children in their homes. We also work with people who just want to adopt. And so you don't always have to foster. You could just straight adopt, and we work to help them facilitate that process.
That's incredible. We have some family friends that were foster parents, and as I've looked back on it, I don't know that I've ever met someone who just fostered one child.
Right.
It always seems like it ends up being 4 and 5 and just like an ongoing forever kind of thing. So tell me more about the fostering program. So is this all encompassing? So if you want to be a foster parent, people can reach out to you and you guys can kind of walk them through the whole process? Is that how that
Yes, we have a new landing page. It's fosterachild.net.
Mm-hmm.
So they would just go to that page. It's my face on there. They would see me, and they can call me through the page. They can email me, and then I would set them up with a background check and fingerprints.
Mm-hmm.
Once those come back, then they would start online trainings. I would come out to their home and do a few more in-person trainings. But most of it is self-paced because we have a lot of people who maybe have husbands who work in the oil field and they're not always home. So a lot of it is self-paced, and we work with their schedules. And then once the process, I would say after about 3 or 4 months, they should be pretty close to the end of the process. They can get certified as a foster home and start taking placements at that time. So what would happen in that situation is our intake worker, as children came into care, she would call out to our foster parents to see if they were interested in taking that particular placement. So just because you're a foster parent doesn't mean you have to take every phone call that we send to you. Sometimes people are going on vacation or it's just not a good time in their family. So for every call, you have the right to say yes or no in that moment. And then if you do take the placement, you could have them for as little as a day. I had a little girl one time that had been abducted from Mississippi, and they found her here in Lufkin. And so I fostered her just for a day, and she didn't speak to me the whole day. And I can't imagine what she went through being taken across state lines by a stranger. But CPS worked very quickly.
Breaks my heart.
It does. It does. And how scared she was just being with me, because here I am, another stranger.
Yeah.
Right.
And she didn't know where she was going or what was happening, I'm sure. But, we just kept her fed and playing and happy as we could and did what we could for her. But CPS returned her home, and that was a happy ending for her. Right. You could have them as little as a day or as long as I've had kids for 1.5 years. And, they become part of your family. Mm-hmm. We really encourage our foster parents to work with birth parents to be a resource for them when the kids go back home. Because, let's say a mother is on drugs and gets her children taken away. When those children come back, it's an even more stressful time for her because now she's trying to rehabilitate herself and she has the stress of children. So if we can encourage our foster parents to be a resource in that moment, then it just makes it so much easier for our birth families to have a success story.
That's awesome. So before we got into doing this podcast, and we've had amazing conversations with people who do adoptions and fostering, but for people who may not know, what's the difference between fostering and adopting? Kind of walk us through that.
With fostering, I always say your job is to love, but not to get attached, but not to get too attached, mm-hmm. because our goal is always reunification with the family. And, we have some people come in and sometimes it's just not a good fit. They don't support that. And that is our number one goal. So we have to kind of tell them from the get-go, maybe it's not for them. And so, it's just, we want to make sure that in fostering, they understand that the child is going to go home or even go to a grandparent or aunt or uncle. And then in adoption, it's more legal and finalized. And so in adoptions, you can choose to be an open adoption or closed. And so in an open adoption, you would still have access to visits with the family. It's kind of at the adoptive parent's discretion at that point. Or you can do a closed adoption where nobody has contact anymore. And, as far as the birth certificates are reissued, and it looks like a normal birth certificate if you had that child. It doesn't say anything about adoption on there. I have a couple situations within my children. My oldest daughter, we have an open adoption with her family. They live in Virginia. We go back every year and see them. And she has brothers, and we keep that line of communication open. It's a very healthy situation. And then for my younger children, there wasn't a good situation there. Even 5 years later, the parents haven't really changed their ways. But we did find other family members that we can connect with. And so they do have a birth aunt that we communicate with. And it's just, to me personally, I never wanted to lie to my children. And so I've always kept it as very open communication, age appropriate for them.
Interesting.
I was moved at when y'all said the other day how many children you have that need to be placed.
Yes.
And then you were talking about if you just could take a kid for a weekend,
Right.
and let the foster parents go out of town for respite, relief, things like that.
Yes.
Let's talk about that.
Sure. So that would be our respite care program.
Okay.
And you would go through about the same kind of trainings as a foster parent. There's a few less, but so you could respite just for a day if the mother needed to take the kids to the doctor, or if she just needed a mental health day,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that happens. Or you could take them for a week or so. Some of our older children have behavioral issues, and sometimes the family just needs a minute to breathe. And so we can use respite in that situation, and the respite provider could respite for a week or two. It's all very situational, and our respite providers are paid by the state. So it is you get a little reimbursement for your time.
Yeah. I can't remember the lady's name. She had on the autism shirt.
Yes, Brandy.
Mm-hmm. When she was talking, she said, and she got very emotional, which of course then I got emotional. I don't let people cry by themselves.
Of course.
And so, she said, we need people that want children,
Right.
not a paycheck.
Right.
Yes.
And it's so true.
Yes.
You see it in movies, you see it on 2020, you see the people that just want to be paid to keep kids, but you just need people with good homes and good hearts.
Yes. And I've always said, if you're doing foster care correctly, there's no money to be made in it. Our very first placement came to us the week before Christmas, and we were flying to Texas to see my family. And so, that money went to his airline ticket and his Six Flags tickets and SeaWorld. And so there's not money to be made in foster care if you are doing it with a good heart.
Yeah.
So, and that is to be there for their clothing assistance. As you know, as kids get older, they want cars and cell phones and nicer shoes.
Yeah, they're expensive.
They are expensive, and they like to eat a lot.
Yes.
But so, do you have enough foster care families here?
We do not. Our office is based in Nacogdoches. And so for the Nacogdoches statistics, we have 38 children in care, and none of them are in Nacogdoches County.
Wow.
And so that means that we do have homes in Nacogdoches, a few, but they were already full with other children or whatever the situation may have been at the time. And so the issue there is that when children are brought into care and they cannot be placed in their home communities, they're sent out to maybe West Texas or South Texas. And when those placements happen so far away from home, it makes visits really hard. A lot of times birth families don't have vehicles, and so we're having to have CPS workers, transport, and they can only transport up to a certain amount of time because there's such a huge caseload. So we are trying really hard to build, especially Lufkin and Nacogdoches, so that we can keep our kids here. Another issue with having them placed far away from home is they lose their church connections. They lose their Boy Scout and Girl Scout leaders. They lose anybody, even their mail carrier, just anybody they have a relationship
Anybody that
with.
was stable in their life.
Yes. It's so many ties cut. And then a lot of times the birth families have quite a big family. And so it's hard to find homes that'll take 2 or 3 siblings, much less 5 or 6.
Yeah.
And so when you have one in Waco and one in Abilene and one in Galveston, it just is almost impossible for them to see each other.
Sure.
So we're really trying hard. We're praying very, very hard for East Texas to step up. And I don't know if you're familiar, but there's a One Church, One Child program. And the idea behind that is that one church will just rally behind one family, and they'll help maybe pay for dance lessons for that child or for clothing, back to school supplies for the child. And so not everybody is able to take a child into their home, but we can all do something to help.
Well, I just think what you're doing is so important. It tugs on my heartstrings, and I know that people that are listening, I just ask that you pray about it and that you consider bringing a child into your family, even if it's just for a little bit.
Yes, absolutely. We would love to speak with the public about it. You're welcome to come by our office. I can come to your home. I can meet you for coffee somewhere, and we can just discuss. And it doesn't lock you into anything, but it gives you the option of knowing the numbers that are out there and knowing how you can help. Even if it's just, praying for us or making a donation, they can go to azleway.org and make a donation for a one-time or reoccurring monthly donations. There's lots and lots of ways that they can help, and we would just love to have that support from our community.
That's great.
If someone wants to help and they want to get started in that process, how do they do that? Is it something they fill out on the website? How do they go?
Yes. So if they'll go to either azleway.org or to my personal landing page, which is fosterachild.net, there's a form on there they can fill out, and they can fill out if they're interested in volunteering, fostering, donating, and that way we know how to reach back out to them. It's a very easy process, and we try to make it as easy as possible. I do want to point out we're a little different than maybe what people are used to with CPS. We are not CPS. We're a private, faith-based nonprofit organization, and we have smaller numbers, and so we can keep eyes on kids better, and we can also be a better resource to our families.
That's amazing. Well, thank you for everything that you do for these kids and for this community. We truly appreciate it, and thanks for coming on and chatting with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Really insightful. I hope this pulled on your heartstrings wherever you're listening. If this is something that you're even remotely interested in, please go reach out and help in any way that you can. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week. Great job.
Thank you.
That was
Good job.
awesome.
The other day, it's just a
Oh my
conversation.
goodness.
So easy. Yeah.
I said, and of course it's going to pour down rain and light.